everyone please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to have a motion to approve the agenda for the business meeting tonight of February 10th, 2025.
Kelly.
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Excuse us. Going to move us to open forum. So the Greenville Central School District wishes to facilitate public access to meetings of the Board of Education and to provide an opportunity for public comments at the meeting. Accordingly, the open forum provides an opportunity for members of the public to share thoughts about topics on the agenda. An individual's comments shall be limited to 5 minutes. Additionally, comments may be emailed to the district clerk, Daphne Pearson, using the email address pearsond@greenvillecsd.org. In order for an email to be read during the meeting, it must be received by 4 p.m. on the day of the meeting and state that the email is to be read out loud. Emails shall be limited to 600 words. Please note that this is not the time to register complaints that need to be addressed confidentially through the proper channels. Remarks that might be considered defamatory, obscene, profane, stigmatizing, or otherwise impermissible in public forums are prohibited and will be declared out of order. Board members actively listen during open forum that may not immediately respond to comments. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Do we have any emails?
We do not.
Okay, then I'm going to move us on to our presentation. And tonight it's a presentation by Chris DiCarlo, and is Nick with you?
Hi, Nick.
Okay. We have us Bernard Donegan, and people should have received the presentation. Welcome.
All right, thank you. All right, so I think the last time I was here in front of the board was the fall of 2022, right before your capital project referendum, so it's good to be back. Tonight's presentation is a little bit different. It's not for a capital project specifically, it's a long-range plan for looking at some trends in terms of revenues and expenses. We will touch on the capital project, just because that does play into the long-range planning of the district, and it does, well, financings that our office works with the district hand in hand with. So what I'd like to do is just run through kind of what a long-range financial analysis is. And again, please stop me at any point in time if you have any questions throughout the presentation. It's a projection of revenues and expenditures and fund balance for the district. Long-range plans differ from budgeting in the sense that your budgeting tends to be a little bit more conservative. In terms of budgeting, you need to be factoring in that there can be unexpected things that come up in terms of students moving to the district, emergency projects or unforeseen things that happen. Long-range plans tend to be a little bit more realistic in terms of the projections that we're doing, and it's really just to give you a high-level look at the trends that we're seeing in your expenditures and your revenues coming in. And again, these are not static documents. School finance changes, monthly, sometimes daily, and especially on a year-to-year basis. So, a lot of times it makes a lot of sense to update these projections on an annual or an every other year basis to kind of see how we're tracking compared to when we present these long-range plans. So the next slide within the document that you have is a look at the financial plan for your $14 million capital project. Again, this was a voter-approved project from December 2022 that you're currently in construction in as we speak. So in the top half of the page, the boxed-in section of that document there are each of your individual SED project numbers. So what we're tracking along there is where are we at in terms of state aid forms that have been filed, and where are we at in terms of what forms need to be filed in the near future. So you received SD approval on both your project numbers back in March of 2024 and awarded contracts in May of 24. We submitted SA 139s. That's one of the many state aid forms that are out there. That's a specific form to your building aid projects. And really what that form does is it lets the state know that we've awarded contracts, and we're getting into the projections for state aid for the upcoming fiscal year. So The deadline for that form to be filed is October 1st, 2024, so that was filed well in advance of that, and we are currently seeing the aid projected in the 25-26 state aid runs and in the state aid outdoor boards. The current projection right now is to close out the project by December 2025, getting final cost reports and certificates of substantial completion forms filed. Those are the two forms that are needed in order for building aid to start flowing on a capital project. So getting the project complete, paid out, all revenues received, and those forms filed with the state by December 31st is critical to aid starting to flow on the capital project timely as we expected.
Just a quick question, when you say substantial completion, that is not necessarily 100% completion.
It's just the name of the document from SD. It actually would mean that form is filed pretty much at the time your architect files that form is when you're in the punch list phase of the project. In order to file a final cost report, the superintendent will be signing off that 100% of the revenues and expenses, the revenues have been received and the expenses have been paid out. So we need to have everything paid out and the project closed out by December 31st in terms of filing a final cost report. And that's what starts that flow of building aid. And given that this is an alteration or reconstruction project, the aid would flow over 15 years for each of those projects. And so we line the debt service for the project up to match with the building aid that's coming back in. So you have that building aid coming back in to offset your debt service payments. So in terms of the bottom half of the page, we've got the green and pink shaded in boxes and then the blue unshaded box. The green shaded box represents the capital reserve, or the that was voted on by the voters. That's essentially your down payment on the capital project to get started. You had some funds that were saved up purposely and strategically for this capital project so that you could put it out to the community with no additional tax impact. In September 2024, we issued the first financing for the capital project. So based on a cash flow that was provided by the district's construction manager, it was determined that you needed about $5.7 million in addition to your capital reserve dollars to get you through the end of fiscal year 25. That note matures in June of 25. And currently the plan is to convert that into permanent financing into a serial bond in June of 2025. So that's what that blue unshaded box represents. And in terms of the two ways that we can issue our bond is either public market on our own here, or we can issue through the DASNY program, the Dorm Authority of the State of New York, with a pooled financing transaction with other school districts in the state. So we'll be running those numbers shortly to make that determination. As that, we need to know in probably about April timeframe which direction we're going to go, whether or not it'll be a local public market issuance or through that DASNY financing pool.
Any questions?
Yep.
Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Two-parter. One, what kind of interest rates are you seeing now, and compared to what we have? And the second part, do you expect that we'd have a better interest rate if we can go through like a pool issuance through DASNY?
Yeah. So the first part of your question, what are interest rates currently? Relatively flat in terms of whether it's a note issuance or a bond issuance. I would expect you to probably be around 3.75 or 4%. If it's a DASNY bond, it tends to be a slightly higher interest rate because it's a revenue bond. That bond is backed by the revenue coming back in from state aid, and it's just a little different type of financing. The advantage of going through the DORM program, the DASNY program, is if you look in the in that text box there, that 3.75% state average interest rate, the state sets a reimbursement rate that they pay us our building aid back based on the year in which we receive SD approval. So if we can get a matching rate on our own through the public market at 3.75, that's great. If rates tick up on us and they get to 5-6%, then the spread between our reimbursement rate and our bond rate becomes larger, which equates to more local share. So what the Dorm Authority program does is if we go through DASNY and we get a 6% bond, they'll override that state assumed rate with a matching rate. So we'll be receiving our revenues back at the same rate that we're paying out our expenditures. So that's why we run that analysis every time before going into those bonds to make sure which is the best program to go through, locally, public market, or through the DASNY program.
When you were forecasting this project, what rate did you assume in your forecast?
Yeah, so we're very conservative in terms of the rates that when we project. So 6% for bonds, 5% for notes. So in terms of the note issuance, the note that's been issued, you got a 3.4% on it, so doing better. And then where current market rates are, we're expecting the project to come in at a better bonding rate than anticipated pre-vote. And you'll see on a couple of slides forward how things are projecting in terms of the local share levels of your capital component.
One more question.
Yep.
What is the DASNY fee? Is that participating or?
Yep. Yeah. So just in terms of restart here. So to issue your bond on your own public market, I would say 60 to 65,000. That includes bond counsel fees, fees for our office, fees for publications. If you issue through the dorm, that tends to be a higher fee. We're currently projecting, we have in the project budget a fee of about $250,000. You do receive building aid back on that. So it's, you get 70% effectively reimbursement at that rate. So it's a little bit easier to kind of manage that and to be able to absorb that fee. It's really what the numbers shake out in terms of the local share, if it's beneficial, which way to go.
Sorry, Chris, we're going to switch to like.
Okay. That's fine. So we'll give it a second. It's probably going to be helpful to see the slides on the screen. Thank you. So the next slide in the report, we look at both your debt service and your aid coming back in for your buildings and your buses in the future. So the buildings are under the blue shaded columns. Column A is your debt service, so that's your principal and interest. That's your principal and interest that's on all of your existing outstanding bonds, as well as the projections for the current capital project. And column B is the associated building aid coming back in on all of your outstanding previous capital projects that's still flowing, as well as the projected 15-year aid repayments on the current capital project. So the real focus for the buildings is under column D, what is the local share, what is hitting the tax levy, and that 260,000 level that you're seeing in most of the years going out through 2035 is consistent with what we were projecting pre-vote. So we're currently seeing that in terms of our projections, we're on target. To your point earlier, with bond rates maybe being a little bit better, our expectation and hope is that maybe this turns out a little bit better than was expected pre-vote, and we can talk about strategies at that point in time in terms of how to structure the bonds to maybe create an opportunity in the future for another capital project to fit in. But that would come in the next few months as we're working with Todd and the business office to structure that debt service payments. Under the green shaded columns are your buses, so that's all of your buses that still have debt service outstanding on them, as well as we're projecting out through votes through the May of 29 budget vote. So it looks like some of those numbers drop off, but it's really just we're projecting out a handful of years, so that this is a 5-year plan. We want to make sure that we're including projections for debt service and transportation aid for at least 5 years out. So debt service, principal and interest under column E, and your transportation aid coming back in under column F. So your local share for buses under column H. And then combined, when you look at your local share for your buildings and your buses as a whole under the gray shaded column I.
Knowing that in 2027 that we've got to shift things, we can't purchase diesel, but we know that we are going to still purchase buses, then I'm kind of at a loss as to why there's an assumption that we're not going to have any new bus purchases.
We've assumed, so maybe I misspoke there, we've assumed bus purchases out through 29-30, at least in terms of those purchases. So we have in 25-26 the assumption of 6 diesel buses, in 26-27 the assumption of 4 diesel buses, and then purchasing EV buses in 27-28 going forward. We just didn't go past 29-30 in the projections, just because there are so many unknowns at this point, but it does include projections for bus purchases for the next handful of years.
When you did the projections in the buses, did you account for the increased cost of the electric?
We did, that's correct. And the other thing to caveat there is that it does assume a higher cost for the buses. It does not assume any grants or rebates coming in, so the numbers can change based on any of those programs that are available, any changes that happen in the next handful of years. I know that the governor recently acknowledged that there might be a shift in the mandate pushing out. It seems unreasonable at this point in time, but we'll see what happens.
So would we need almost like different scenarios rather than just assuming none, in the sense that if it gets pushed out, then we would still continue on the cycle that we go? I guess I just get nervous when there are no buses in the assumption.
Well, there are buses in the assumptions.
Right, but if this is a long-term plan, then 5 years out, there shouldn't be any. I'm hesitant about someone picking this up 2 years from now and saying, here's the roadmap, and yet there's a big element that's missing.
Right. So if we updated it in a year or 2 years from now, we would project out for another 5 years for that one as well. It just there's a point in time where we could just keep running the schedules for forever going forward. So in terms of the projections you're going to see later on in the report, those go out 4 or 5 years. So that's why we cut it off at a certain point in time. And as more information becomes available, we'll extend it out. And as if Todd and the transportation department have more available information, we can certainly run out schedules for 10, 15, 20 years if that's helpful.
So the focus, real quick on that. The focus of this plan was a 5-year lookout. So on here, yes, it looks like it goes beyond that. Part of that is because when you look at building 8, some of our current projects goes well beyond the 5 years. So the main focus of this work that Chris and his office did for us was 5 years. We were focusing on just those 5 years to 29-30. What are the projected bus purchases within that time frame? By not having any bus purchases on here, it doesn't mean we're not going to be purchasing buses. We will be purchasing buses. It's just to project out that far of what our bus purchases will be. There's too many unknowns, too many variables, so we thought it wasn't worth coming up with 6,000 scenarios and what it could be in 2030. We just focused on, okay, we think, based on what we know right now, between now and 29-30 school year, this is what we're looking to purchase in terms of buses.
And I agree 100%. That's not my issue. Can we label this as a 5-year? Because this says long-range financial planning. I'm looking at 2041. I'm seeing a disconnect. Don't show numbers past 5 years. I'm being a nudge because I've seen mistakes made because people are assuming one set of variables versus another. So I just want to be very clear, label it the 5-year plan and not show past 5 years.
Okay. No, that makes sense. We can, we'll certainly incorporate that into any updates that we do.
So before we do that, is this the same form that you've always done in the past for us?
The last time that this was presented was in 2018-19, I believe. So it's been a few years, so there might have been some modifications to the long range
But it's
plan.
always been 5 years.
Correct. Yeah, that's,
So it's the same form,
yep,
flavor. a little bit.
yeah, correct.
So my question is, as far as projecting to the future, does this include the charging stations, or would that be a separate project?
That would be a separate project, just because none of those variables are known at that point. These are project costs that are not in this at this point.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome.
So, just to pile on to Tracy's point, I agree that it should be clarified, but the first slide, what is a long-range financial analysis? I think notable there explaining what it is. I mean, I would say I would like to keep the extra information, but there you could explain, it's a 5-year look for official years or improvement or however you want to say it. And we got the question of this is right.
Appreciate the feedback.
Chris, I have a question. On your building code, this page, your column D, are those numbers, especially the more recent numbers, 26, 27, 28, are they in line with what we're currently assuming in our budget for local share?
Yes. I remember.
How often do you recommend that we have this updated?
This?
Yes.
At least every 2 years, probably would be a good, every year is great, but every other year at least is a good, kind of a good, checkpoint in time.
Well, now, look, to Mike and Todd, since it's been, I think, longer than that since we've had an update, what do you recommend moving forward for the next iteration of this?
I would suggest, just based on some of the concerns and the unknowns that are happening within New York State right now, that coming back to this group every 2 to 3 years would make some good sense to get updates and get an understanding of the interest rates, where we're going, what things look like.
Personally, I would say every 1 to 2 years, but 2 seems reasonable. I mean, I don't know if anyone else on the board has different opinions, but I think more frequently than every 5 years.
I agree, 2 years seems fair.
I also agree 2 years. However, if things unfold and we have a duration, I think instead of waiting the 2 years, we should convene and try to update so we can get some more current information.
2 years is pretty common. We have some districts that do them every year, but 2 is a pretty common number of years.
I guess we're just trying to manage an uncertainty, and so
Yeah.
what you're feeling this is, between the mandates and the lack of information, but yet having to put together the financial roadmap of how to do it, I think has, we feel like we're walking on eggshells, or, the landscape is shifting.
Yeah, New York State certainly has made it easy in terms of the different variables that are out there for school finance. So. The next slide is just a graphical look at the local shares. So again, the blue bars represent the building, and the green bars represent your buses. So that's just a graphical look at those columns that are from the previous page. The next slide just takes a look at trends in terms of your fund balance. So really focus on the bottom part of the page here. The district has been maintaining a good level of fund balance. You can see from 22 to 23, there was a slight drop, and that was really done with the capital reserve dollars that were contributed to the capital project. So that was an intentional, purposeful drop in terms of utilizing those capital reserve dollars that were set aside for the purpose of the capital project. And really, the other takeaway from this page would be is that based on the current expenditures and the current revenue projections, it does look like as of today, there could be some dollars potentially available to be used to fund some reserves or to, and this is a moving target as you get closer to the year. This is kind of a snapshot as of January, I would say. But that's, as you get closer to the end of the year, determining how much maybe there might be available in terms of balances, in terms of being able to put into some of your reserves that you have outstanding, whether that be capital reserve or other reserves, to help plan for the future. In the bottom right corner, you're around that 4% unappropriated fund balance, which is a pretty common number to see in New York State schools. The next slide takes a look at state aid projections. So the 24-25 and 25-26 numbers are based off of the latest governor's proposal and the latest governor's run. So a 2% increase in foundation aid from 24-25 to 25-26. Going forward, the assumption in this plan is that assuming that same 2% for years going forward, as you all know, that's unknown, but to give us something, some sort of a basis here in terms of projections, we're assuming a 2% foundation aid increase going forward. All other aid categories we're maintaining as flat to be conservative. The only ones that we are overriding in this analysis are the orange shaded ones, which are your building aid and your bus aid. Building aid because we know the timing of when your projects are going to close out, and we know more about the expenditures that you're going to be reporting in your final cost reports than the state aid office does. So we override those numbers in the projection. So again, 2% foundation aid increase, buildings and buses are overridden based on the data previously provided in the analysis, and then all the other aid categories essentially holding flat to be conservative. The next slide is a lot of information. This is our tax cap projection page. What we really do on this page is just take a look at your tax cap for the current year going forward to try to figure out what your maximal allowable limit will be going forward potentially. Again, this is based off of the data as of today. These numbers can and more than likely will evolve based on different factors in terms of your tax-based growth factor and your allowable levy limit. Really the main focus of this page is that in the middle of the page there, it says whether a supermajority vote is needed. This plan assumes that no supermajority votes are needed. And we're using these percentages in terms of projecting taxes into the future on the upcoming pages in terms of the revenue pages.
It seems like you're alternating between 2, 2.5, and then under 2. Was that done intentionally as far as the tax levy, what the percentage?
Those numbers are just a product of the formula based on the calculations that we've come up with. So what those numbers represent is the maximum for your tax cap in each of those years. So that's what we're using going forward, assuming that this is a max tax cap scenario for this long-range plan going forward.
Because the way that the law is written is inflation or 2%, whichever is lower, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the tax-based growth factor is determined by the Department of Tax and Finance based on the growth, economic growth within the community. So that's a number, again, another number that's out of your hands that's determined for the district going forward. And so in 25-26, that number is 1, so you're not getting any sort of tax-based growth factor in the calculation going forward. That could change on a year-to-year basis, and it has been different in the years past when we look back at previous data for previous years for the calculations.
We could theoretically be in a situation where, let's say you have a, 5-6% inflation, but yet if it's the lesser of the two, we'd never be able to go out at more than 2, correct?
That's effectively.
One question about this. Is there any assumption on manipulating the reserves for a target tax cap or levy?
So in terms of changing the exclusion amount, you have, the reserve, it does not factor any of that in going forward. I mean, if you were using debt service fund or other appropriated fund balance, that could potentially change the calculation, but that is not factored in to this point. The next slide takes a look at revenues going forward. So in the top half of the page there, you can see the blue italicized numbers. Those are the numbers that are pulling from the prior tax cap calculation page. And that's really setting the maximum amounts to raise taxes by. So this analysis does assume going to the max tax cap in terms of the property taxes within the district. And then we've taken the state aid numbers from our previous page as well and incorporated those into this analysis as well, about 3/4 of the way down the page. So the real takeaway from the revenues page is in the bottom right corner. You can see our revenues are a little under 2%, about 1.9% in this analysis. So remember that number because that's going to play into what we're going to see in the projections going forward.
Question.
Yep.
Going back to the slide. Federal aid, $40,000 or so, is that the total amount of federal funds that we receive?
That's I'll have to defer to Todd on that one, but that's what we're seeing in terms of the amount in terms of that's showing up on that in that category.
We receive more than that in federal funds, type of grants.
You know, approximately how much?
Like 1.5 million on the top line. But that's in Title I, Title II. Title IV.
Is that all through the department head, those grants?
Yeah.
Thanks.
This is 40, I'd have to look specifically what this is referring to. It's pulled into general fund, I'm not sure.
The next slide in the report takes a look at the expenditures or expenses going forward. And so you have the actuals for 2024 under the orange shaded line, and then projections or expectations for the year end for fiscal year 25 in terms of the various categories of general support, instruction, transportation. For salaries going into the future under the green shaded, where it's assuming a 3.5% increase. Really what's driving the majority of the increase on this page, as you can imagine, would be the hospital, medical, and dental insurance line. We're assuming a 15% increase year to year going forward. So that's really driving a lot of the expenses on this analysis in terms of the bottom line or the bottom corner there that having the expenditures projecting about a 5.4% increase. So when we have revenues at about 1.9% and expenses at 5.4%, you're going to see a gap that's going to start to build there between the revenues and the expenses based on what we're projecting out here. And we're also including the debt service figures that we went over in the previous slides.
Do you happen to know for the past 3 years kind of what the benefits or the medical has actually come in at? What increases?
I do not have that information available this evening. I don't know, Todd, if you have that information.
If you could just follow up on over the past 3 years, what the insurance has actually come in at.
So the next slide in the report takes the revenues and the expenditures from the previous slides and projects out for 26 through 30. And so you can see as the expenditures outpace the revenues, we're projecting deficits into the future based on the assumptions that are being made in the plans here. And overall, the bottom half of the page just shows the use of some of your fund balance and reserves along the way. You do see red on the page, but if we're projecting expenses to outpace the revenues, that's to be expected. But showing that in a negative fund balance situation out a few years based on the current projections.
Well, this is scary.
It's common to see these just based on the increases in terms of health insurance, salaries. So really, it's not uncommon to see these. Some districts that we do these for, that the drop off is a couple of years sooner. Some don't have a drop off. But really, it's just it's not to scare you or alarm you. It's just in terms of decisions that can be made that affect the long-term health of the district in terms of financials. It's just being mindful of those long-term decisions in terms of negotiations. And in terms of some of those big decisions that are being made. So it's not uncommon to see this, but it's just really to point out and just to get in front of you that there are, there can be discrepancies in the revenues that you can control, which are, you have foundation aid, which is a little bit out of your control, state aid that's a little bit out of your control. But you do have the ability to manage, to a certain extent, your taxes by going out to the max tax cap or making the decisions in terms of the expenditures going forward. If there's services that can be shared with BOCES, or if there's other opportunities for savings, kind of tightening the belt on the expenditure side, that could shorten some of these gaps and some of these differentials.
When you're doing these calculations, is this all based on what we are currently offering, staying status quo?
Correct.
Chris, in your experience of working with other, and you don't have to answer this question if you feel it's inappropriate, but working with other districts, do you find that they come very, very close to their tax cap maximum, or are they? I know not many of them are open.
It's relatively, few and far between the districts that you have to do this for majority, but certain situations, require that. In terms of, it's easy for me to sit here in this chair and say, go to the tax cap, go right to the max, but you know your community better, the programs that you're trying to offer here, so it's a mixed bag of districts that go to the cap, but if you don't go to the cap, just know that there are dollars that are potentially being left on the table. And it's not just in that 1 year that you're not going to the cap. It compounds going forward in the sense that your following year, you're starting at a lower base than if you went to that max cap number in that first year.
So remind me of your calculations. You are projecting that we're going to be at our tax cap, and we're still coming up with these numbers.
Correct.
We just recently invested our funds into high-yielding interest accounts, so does that come into play here at all?
It can, and it helps. However, the concern with, on the revenue side, when we get to the March meeting, when we're talking about revenue specifically for next year, when we look at what we budgeted for this current year, for example, and what we expected to take in interest, we far exceeded that this year because the interest rates that we were able to get. The caution is we don't want to increase what we expect every year in that area because there's no guarantee a year from now, 2 years from now, what are those interest rates going to be. So I actually started this work after the last board meeting of let's look back 5-6 years where our interest rate total was. It was very low comparatively to what it was this year. So does that help this year and potentially yes, next year? Yes. But in the big picture of shifting what shows up on these types of reports for what we expect in revenue, we don't want to push too far because then we create a potential deficit that's different.
And is this also fiscal years ending 25, 26?
Correct.
What is our fiscal year? I don't know. So we should read this as 6. Math is too hard. We do on a Monday. That's corresponding like the school year.
So the expectation column is the year that we're currently in. So the expectation would be June 30th, 2025.
So the projection fiscal year ending 26 is really this current snapshot of projection of what we might be facing with the upcoming budget.
Correct.
Thanks.
The next slide just is a look at what your allowable levy increases were in the past and the cumulative effect of the tax levies that you've gone out with. So the green bars represent the allowable tax levy increase and the blue bar represents the actual tax levy increase. And this is a cumulative amount. So if you look out at fiscal year 25, from 2015 to 2025, the cumulative tax allowable levy increase was about 3.9 million, and you went out with tax, with taxes around a little bit under 3.1 million. So, there is a slight gap in some of those further out years. That just, again, it's just dollars that just weren't levied up to the max in the past. And again, those were decisions that were made, throughout the last 10 years. So there's probably different reasons for each one of those, depending on that given time frame. If you think back to the, there's been talks of foundation aid cuts back in 20% state aid cuts, and then federal funding with COVID funds. So it's just been a mixed bag of obstacles and challenges over the last 10 years. So, but just thought it was worthwhile just to show you kind of where you've been at in the past and kind of where we're at now, and then just another form of just a graphical look at just what the tax levy increases were compared to the allowable levy limit in each year back 2015.
And that's always the balancing act
For sure.
for that. So kind of balancing the needs of the students and balancing the needs of the taxpayers. So
so some considerations, it's control what you can control, I guess. You don't have much control over state aid and foundation aid. The one thing you can control is just what you're going out with for tax in terms of your, limited in terms of a tax with the tax cap era. Being mindful of expenditures, other shared services that can be offered through BOCES or other programs. Having just a planned use of reserves going forward, and this one's probably becoming a little bit less significant these days, but monitoring the transition off the federal funds as those dollars were available for certain programs. And that's just a similar slide to kind of what I went over the last slide, just some thoughts going forward. Any questions?
Personal question about the stimulus money, and again, reflecting on what you work with other districts, but I find most districts that follow those monies into ongoing budgets.
In terms of,
Well, if you use those funds to fund ongoing expenses, and you hold on to those expenses, then they need to be funded by continuation budget. Is that common?
I mean, it depends on a district-to-district basis in terms of what the programs are that were being funded by that and what their needs are. So it's tough to give an all-inclusive answer there. Each district's a little bit different.
I don't think many districts take the follow guidance. There was supposed to be one-time shot at deals, right?
I thought, since this hasn't been done, you said what, 2019?
Correct.
And with things being as unknown as they are right now, I feel like it might be more prudent on our behalf to run this again, at least for the next year or two, on an annual basis rather than every other year. And just until we get our feet under us with this. And this is scary looking, like you said, with things changing over the next weeks, months, whatever. Wouldn't it be better for us to have a more firm, basic package to look at? Does that make sense? Kind of like you were saying, you don't want to have this sitting here 2 years from now and somebody say, well, you pushed out this far. Wouldn't it be better for us to have 2 or 3 years where it's annually, and then, okay, we're in a position now where we understand it, and we can go more broad, more in the other thing.
absolutely, and I think that in looking at the expenses and as we get better numbers and so forth, and to see if some of the assumptions are still holding up, or do we have a respite, because that's really what's driving a lot of it for that. So,
And we can run different scenarios too, in terms of different projections, different amounts. I mean, it can be tailored to whatever the needs are and whatever additional things you want to see.
I think similar to anything else we do, it's, with our other surveys and stuff, we can stay consistent with what we're running. That gives us a better picture. If you start changing up scenarios and stuff, then we're not getting, unless it's absolute like, oh, EV buses have definitely changed and no longer, we don't have to worry about that for another 7 years, or we absolutely do have to worry about it in 2027. Then yeah, change the scenario. But otherwise, running the same way and seeing big change, no change, may be a little more helpful for those of us who are not financial.
but I think that part of the assumptions, if you run with expenses or the insurance running at 13%, you're going to see some big shifts and things. I'm assuming that's what you meant.
Yeah, different in terms of, yeah, overall similar looking document with the same data, but it's different percentages or projections in terms of revenues. Maybe there's more information known about aid increases or changes in aid, but maybe you have more of a planned use or a plan for, you know, what the insurance expenses might be for the years to come.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
And if we really want to geek out and kind of understanding sorry, Kelly, the sensitivity, I mean, what are the three factors that are driving all of the expenses? So that's really what's going to move the needle on it when you're doing any type of modeling. We could do a regression analysis in which we look at the sensitivity of each of the variables. It's easy to do, guys.
And again, it's not uncommon to see these numbers where they are. Anytime you have, you know, expenditures, we're projecting at that percentage increase compared to revenues, it's going to look like this for any district that we do this for. So, you know, if we come back and the drop and, you know, the numbers look the same 3 or 4 years out as they do now, you're probably doing things, you know, correctly or properly. If I come back next year and, you know, the fund balance is in the red a year sooner, then, you know, that's maybe time to maybe be a little more alarmed, maybe saying we need to make more urgent action or take more, or have some more decision making at that point in time.
Just one of the nice things, I remember sitting in one of these seats when we weren't getting foundation aid or anything else, and it was a very different picture. So I think that it's important to also keep the perspective of the foundation aid is still solid, I say that in quotation marks, for that. And so it was supposed to be a word of encouragement that we've been in worse situations.
Well, I think it is safe to say, though, as we get into our rollover budget, we present a rollover budget, that is always higher than, you know, where we can end up. So, you know, it's up to our office, the Board of Education, and our building level administrators to really take a look at programming. How can we best utilize, you know, our revenues and our monies that we have to be able to provide. So it will always be a constant struggle year to year in regards to, okay, how do we get to that number that we know that we can get to. And that will, because we know our expenses are continuing to go up, whether it's insurance, salaries, all those things. So we are constantly looking at, you know, how we're spending money now to be able to provide programming for our kids. So it's always a daunting task. We look at that whole budget and say, okay, we got to cut $1.4 million somehow. Then we start to take a look at revenues and take a look at where we're coming in at. So things do shake out. You know, but it's tough 2-3 years down the road to say, how does it shake out?
Thank you for all the questions. That's the most questions that I've gotten doing one of these, so I appreciate the engagement. And I just also want to thank Todd and Melanie for their assistance. And you know, it takes a lot of meetings and a lot of efforts to pull this information together and this data together. And they were both very helpful in, you know, getting the information timely and meeting with us to run through the projections. So just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
And thank you for kind of highlighting and showing the roadmap of what the situation is and so forth. We greatly appreciate it and we use it.
Perfect. You're welcome.
All right, and I'm going to move us on to our discussion topics. And first up would be Tatum Blackman. If you have anything that you wanted to share, I'm going to turn it over to you then.
Okay, so I just have some information that I want to share with you guys because the first thing is definitely the cell phone policy. Students are starting to find out about it, so I figured I'd kind of ask around and see what everyone's thinking. And I got the answer, I think, and a lot of kids are obviously upset about it. They think it's violating their rights, and they think that they want the cell phones for emergency contact purposes and stuff. But surprisingly, I also heard a lot of students that supported it, especially upperclassmen, because they think that it would just help and be beneficial to the learning environment and stuff. So I got mixed responses on that. I didn't ask the most amount of people, but I'm going to do that probably in the future. But that's just basically a basis of what I've heard so far. I also want to share like some information I got from the middle school survey that I sent out. I think I sent it out in December, and I've gotten a lot of responses. So the first thing was just almost all of the responses actually were about sports. A lot of kids really want football, and I'm sure you guys already know that. It's a thing that's sent out every year. But a lot of students actually proposed an idea that I feel like would be doable, and they think we should do more clubs and activities that aren't like official teams that can like allow students to still like express their interest in certain games. Like pickleball is a big one. Everyone wants a pickleball club. Football, flag football, lacrosse, and all those sort of things. I feel like that could be doable in the future. Just to, I know that pickleball especially is becoming a very big thing, and I feel like that would be interesting for students, especially because there's a lot of interest in it now. Instead of like getting all the funds for a whole pickleball team or anything, or a football team and all that, just I think we should look more into clubs and stuff like that. So that was basically what they said with that. I mean, there was a couple other things, but that was like the main picture with the middle school. And I also just wanted to share with you guys that like I'm still waiting on elementary school responses. I'm gonna kind of collect information from them. And basically, I met with Mr. Urban, and we came up with the idea to ask the team leaders of all of the grades in elementary to discuss with their students some simple questions and kind of get their input. So I put together 3 questions. It's what are your favorite parts of school? What parts of school do you think could be better? And what are some strengths in school? And what are some things you can improve on? So I feel like that'll kind of be simple enough for them to share their opinions, but still, I think the teachers have a plan to kind of get the most out of it without, like, I wouldn't be able to send out a survey to them. I think that they would get the most from a class discussion or something. So once I get, like, their responses from that and everything, I'll share that with you guys, too. So that's pretty much it.
Tatum, did you hear from middle school anything about, like, discipline or bathrooms or anything that high schoolers complained about?
I got, like, from what I saw, probably like 5 responses about that kind of stuff. There was a couple about like discipline, but nothing about the vaping or anything in the bathrooms. The second most thing I got was food related. Like it was really just sports and food, and then a couple kids that were like disciplined. So that's basically what I got.
Also, thank you for saying that about pickleball. I've been pushing for that for like 4 years.
It's gotten a lot bigger, and also even in the high school, like I know we have a ping pong club. I feel like if they did like an alternating thing between pickleball and ping pong or something like that, if there's so many kids that are interested in ping pong, I'm sure they'd be interested in pickleball. And now that it's being done in gym classes, people are really loving it. Like even me and my friends go to the YMCA now to do pickleball because it's so fun. So I feel like that'd be a really good club for kids.
What was the food feedback you got?
Just kids saying they want more food. More food, better pizza, stuff that you hear all the time.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to move us on to the capital project update, and Mike Bennett, the superintendent, is going to provide that.
Yeah, so this is a slower part in our season in regards to capital project. We do have a couple of things that, meetings coming up in a meeting we just had. I'll start with our page turner that was supposed to be last week. That's where we're going to get together with our architect, schoolhouse, construction management team, and Bob Goff, who is our overall general contractor. And the goal of this is really to go through the plans for the existing completion of the renovations and the work that is to be done. We want to make sure that we have put eyes on the plans so that we have a good understanding of what is the expectation for completion of this work. Because what we don't want to do is get into a situation where we're going to be delayed into September with the work that's going to be done. So we're going to have that this Wednesday. We're looking forward to trying to hammer out all those issues that we had, start the project so that we are not delayed at all. The other piece that I want to just kind of update everybody on is the EV bus. As Chris mentioned, most of you are aware, it's been kind of, the governor is considering some different options here. We're not exactly sure what's going to happen there, but we are continuing to work with Cornice with our transition plan to EV buses. We met with them on Friday. And for task 4, which was really basically a report on what we can currently do to support with our current infrastructure. So, which wasn't really much of a surprise. It is basically one bus and one charger, and we're not in a position where we want to do anything with just the one bus. If we have to go forward with this, we want it to be part of a bigger project. So feedback, Rich and Mary were on the call as well, is just trying to get them the information they need so that they can move forward with task 5, which then will be reported out to us and to the Board of Education on next steps. I believe task 5 is their bellwether as far as getting us information on where we need to go. So that will give us, they're talking a lot with contractors, both from the busing standpoint and the utility standpoint, and making sure that we are able to move forward with the project and what that would cost if that's what we were going to do. So,
and I'm cautiously optimistic about this waiver that will hopefully be approved for us to opt out or get a longer timeline.
yeah, it's definitely gotten some traction. I think that there is some, how do I say this? There is some practicality that's come into play in regards to a straight rollout across the state. We're not all created equal in regards to where we live and our turning and our routing system. So we're hoping that there is, and we're hearing that there is going to be some potential movement on this. So what that looks like, we don't know. But we're pushing forward with this work, with this study, as if it's not going to change, because ultimately it may be a delay and not a complete scrap of the idea. So we want to make sure that we are getting all the information that we need in regards to what this would cost, and then try to plan from there. Yes.
Initially, there was a question whether or not our utility could provide the power. Is that looking more promising?
I believe that it is. I think that there has, I mean, obviously there's some infrastructure work that we would need to do here. But from what we're hearing, not just locally, but across the state, that power grid companies are able to meet the needs of districts that would need things, which is far different than it was a year ago.
That's just what the utility's been telling you? Or do you
That's what we're getting through this research, the work that Cornice is doing for us.
Do you know where they're getting that information from?
My guess would probably be the utility companies themselves.
I don't want to get bogged down in this now, but could you find out?
Sure.
Because I know there are other sources which are projecting much tighter supply of electricity on the state. So I'd just be curious to know what their basis for the forecast is.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree. One of the conferences that we attended back in October, I think it was the state level of energy, it was at NYSERD or whatever, and they were like, oh yeah, it's all fine, and individual districts were standing up going, you may say it's fine, but our local level, we're not getting that. So if they're getting their info from the state versus central Hudson themselves, that's a different story.
Right, I agree. NYSERD, for example, would have probably a somewhat rosier projection than the entity that actually has to plan the reliable operation of it. It probably won't, we're not making decisions on it now, of course, so just curious. And one more question. When you mentioned, Angel, when you mentioned the waiver, I don't remember, but I think it would be helpful just for a public discussion anyway. If there has been a waiver discussed, how long would that be? Like, what would the delay be, or is there just no information yet?
There's no information yet on what that is. It's just, all I know is that something's being floated and considered, but from what those details are, I have not seen them. I don't know, Scott, if you've seen them at all, or Todd, from the waiver standpoint, sorry.
If there is a delay, it would simply be putting off the final decision until after the election.
Boy,
I wouldn't be surprised if things become more definite after that.
you're probably not wrong.
Yes.
I think, is there something up with Central Hudson? There was some meeting in Kingston recently, and then they were talking about a possible, they were proposing a state takeover or something in Kingston. I don't know. So they specifically mentioned Central Hudson and Four Up in Arms, so if you could just make a note and see if that impacts us in any way.
Tracy, you said that the state takeover of Central Hudson?
Something I was reading, it just didn't make sense, so I put a question mark, and I'm like, let me ask someone.
Tracy, it might be the same thing, but there's a state representative who's been advocating for the state to take over Central Hudson, having more of a public power authority. My personal opinion is it's highly unlikely. So, I mean, a lot of reasons, not the least being it would be extraordinarily expensive. So I want to see how we save money, and part of the rationale behind it is it would be cheaper for customers, but I don't see it. And I think it's highly unlikely it would go forward, and even if the law was passed, I think essentially it's going to be challenging. So it's probably not something we have to worry about in the foreseeable future.
Thank you. It just seemed to come out of left field. I'm like, what in the world are they talking about? Okay, that makes sense. Then, Mike, can you also provide an update about the task force that you were looking to create for the GNT to be renamed?
Yes. We have not yet convened the task force. What we're working on now is just getting together some of the information in regards to what we are offering, I don't want to say above and beyond the classroom experience, but to make sure that we are, one of the things that we talked a lot about is that whole idea of gifted and talented means something different for everyone, because it doesn't have to be just in the classroom with schoolwork. It can be other things. So we're trying to get a good library of what those things are, so that when we get the task force together, we can start to pick apart what do we want to do, where are we strong, where are we not so strong. So we're working on that.
Next on the agenda is discussion. We have the cell phone community forum, and I'm going to provide the update on that. I'd say that when we had it several weeks ago in January, overall I felt that it was well attended. We had a nice representation of parents. We also had some teachers, and then we walked the individuals attending through what the governor was or is proposing for we're calling it cell phone, but it really is a much broader term because it's any internet-connected device, in which case that covers watches and really any item that connects into the internet. The governor is proposing a bell-to-bell, no phone policy, and I feel that coming out of that workshop, the sentiment with the people attending were pretty much in agreement with that. And one of the things that I wanted to have a discussion amongst us tonight is really to ask the board the question of, regardless of what the governor is proposing, what does Greenville want to do? Are we interested in adopting a bell-to-bell, no phone policy? So with that, I'm either going to start it with Angela or Dave. You guys can pick.
I'll go first. I'll get it out of the way. Cell phones are a great tool, but they're also a problem. I would be for a ban of some extent. I don't necessarily see that it would need to be bell to bell unless the state says it needs to be. I don't know why they wouldn't be able to have them like during a study hall, during lunch. I do see the issue with policing or, keeping it under control. I know of instances where kids are recording each other and sharing it and putting it on the internet. I think it's a problem. I do think it's a distraction. I would be for a ban within reason, and within reason for me would be allowing it during free periods. And the flip phone thing, I would be okay with that. The non-internet phones being allowed for emergencies. That's my opinion.
I wasn't here for it, but I did read all the reports. Appreciated that at least that the staff also inputted to the discussion. For me, I have some reservations on some bell is fine. However, freedom to have usage during study halls, or I think as long as you're in good standing, then that could be a caveat to have create better classmanship. Also on extracurricular, like on buses, say for instance you're traveling for sports or some other event that's through the school, as long as the coaches or the people that are in charge, I think it should be left up to them whether they can use them or not. I don't want to just take it out completely. But as far as moving forward, yes, it is a distraction. I understand, and I'll go with to reduce the distraction. How we do it with yonder vouchers or different ways, I think needs to be discussed a little bit further as far as how we get to the level. But I agree we have to do something to reduce the amount of distraction in the classrooms.
I agree with all the concerns that Angela and Jim raised in support of doing something. So I think that it should be restricted in some way. I don't know what the answer is, whether it's bell to bell or I know some schools will. I think the start of each class, you have to put your device, just inside or something. I think we should talk about what the appropriate plan would be. But I don't know. I don't have an opinion yet as to what the answer is. Just that you agree, given the distraction of the reasons discussed in the forum and tonight, that we should do something to try to reduce the distraction and restrict use during at least classroom time, if not beyond. But we need to have a better understanding of kind of what the options are and how they could work, not just from including from a kind of just a very pragmatic perspective of how would we actually implement it, what would enforcement look like, how would we follow through to make sure it's actually doing what it's supposed to do, how it will work for the teachers, etc. So just we want to better. Sorry, I think we'll get better now. If we're doing something, need more information in the proposal to understand those details.
I guess my thought is that bell is perfect. As far as after school and so forth, there are sports involved, so if they involved, I get it. You have to call for the ride at the end of the day and stuff like that. As far as during a classroom time, bell type thing, I don't see where the student would need to be using that device, they have their own other devices to get to the internet with. So having a phone to go to the internet doesn't seem to be a requirement for education. And as far as the distraction part goes, I think all the data that I read says, yeah, it's a distraction. The children are being hurt by this. And my children are grown up, so they're not as affected. I think all parents should be concerned and try to figure out what they think they want their children to do. It's truly a parental issue as far as how the student uses a phone in the big picture. But for teaching, the teachers aren't asking them to use their phones. They don't even. So I'm done with that.
Kelly?
I am definitely in favor of creating a policy for our district regardless of what the state says. I understand the idea of the free time, and part of me wants to be like, well, yeah, I mean, I love to be on my phone for 5-10 minutes and veg out too, but I think I'm leaning more bell to bell. I've seen, being in the school, I've seen a lack of socialization among the kids, and I think that it's hard to put it down once you pick it up. And I'm concerned that it's going to be a bigger, it's going to be a harder task to input than we may even estimate based off some of the stuff that we heard at that forum. This is going to put a lot on our administrators and our teachers, and we need to make sure that the support is in place for them from anything that we can do from our level. I definitely agree. We live in a time and in an area where having them available for the bus ride home to call a parent who's got to get here 20 minutes away. You can't take them away on the bus after school for sports and stuff like that, musical rehearsals and so on. I understand that. But I agree. I think I'm more bell to bell, and I think there needs to be a separate conversation or plan in place to deal with, for lack of a better term, the withdrawal that it's going to create.
Go ahead, Dave, I'll go last.
Okay, we'll give you that privilege. I agree with what everybody said. First of all, I wanted to thank the people that showed up for the forum. I thought that some of the parents were really informed and had some experience with this issue. And then I really appreciate some of the staff members sharing their experiences and giving us a genuine lesson on what actually is going on inside the classrooms in the building as far as cell phones are concerned. I think that actually what's going to happen with this issue is the exceptions are going to make the rule. So if we come up with whatever the policy is going to be or procedure, once you start making exceptions, then it's going to all leak in that direction. That's what the consensus I got from the forum, and I understand that there was a segment of parents that were there, and there were parents that should have been there that weren't there to express what their thoughts were, and other community members. But I personally think that it's the Wild West now in all schools on this particular topic, and I think the only way to get out of that is to have a total ban where the phones stay at home. If there is no educational purpose to having an actual cell phone, because the computers do all the educational things that may need to be done. So then if you start making exceptions, how do you handle communication for sports and after-school stuff? I think that those provisions can be made with a common sense approach. What that approach is, that's happening. But I do agree that, like Kelly started out saying, that we need to do something to help the teachers out, and actually, quite frankly, to help the students out. What I'm reading is that from admin or from teachers and staff in other districts that have gone down this road, that the students are starting to actually come back, they're starting to engage. I saw a report the other day that students are having problems interpersonal relations, that they can't develop relationships because they don't know how to do it without a screen in front of them. And what we can do as far as educators is to remove the distraction and then maybe teach them how to appropriately interact with these devices, and then, adjust our policies and procedures once we have it under control. But that's my feelings. I agree with Kelly that despite what the state does, we need to do something to help our folks out, and really the students that, maybe they don't want to do it because they don't know what really should be done.
One thing, I don't mean to speak, I forgot to mention this, because it's not just cell phones, it's any internet-connected device. I know for some reason, I'll just say personally, my daughter uses a MacBook, chose to because she was having problems with the school-issued tablets because of the battery and other things. I think we need to be careful as far as long as she's using that for a school thing, it's not a cell phone type thing. I would like to see that not banned. She's using that, or other people are also using their own particular laptops or MacBooks in order to have a more reliable platform for them for their learning. But so I'd be careful to ensure those devices aren't then prohibited in that case.
Well, I think one of the things that there's been a lot of discussion about are devices, computers that are used for educational purposes. So those are not included in this ban or whatever restriction that we want to call it. Personally, there's been a lot of information. I think that just watching students not interact with each other is telling. And I think that the cell phones, we're calling it cell phones, but it really is social media. And I think given the addictive nature of it, that right now, I don't think that it's conducive to a healthy learning environment. So I'm in favor of for all the reasons discussed, bell-to-bell ban on it. I think it just makes it easier for administrators, for teachers, and so forth to kind of manage it, at least initially, and kind of see how things are going. As with anything, it evolves and so forth. That's kind of where I'm standing on it. So the policy committee met and had a discussion about putting together and crafting some type of policy, but we didn't want to go further really without having the discussion among all the members of the board to kind of see what the sentiment was for that. Tatum, did you want to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add from like a student's perspective, I think it gets kind of difficult when you make exceptions, but I do think it's important to not kind of categorize all students and their use of cell phones in like one policy, because I feel like there's a lot of students that taking away like their cell phones, not for addiction purposes, but like just the fact that they won't have consistent contact with their family at all times might cause anxiety, especially like from my personal perspective, like the amount of times I've sat in an English class and I can't focus because I'm awaiting some important test results or something, and my mom's texting me about it, comforting me, or she's gonna tell me whenever she finds out. Like those sort of things, like if you take away the students, like I know that situation is kind of rare, but if you take away the students' access to their family and people that might provide comfort, that can cause a lot of anxiety, and I think that would cause more distraction in class than having like a cell phone, like, or yeah, having a cell phone. I think obviously for like in general, I think that they should be in classes and they should be banned, but I do think that there should be a policy for students that are going through things that are known. Like, I know it doesn't sound fair, but like, I think that would cause a lot of anxiety among students, and I think that would affect, although I know this like policy is supposed to help their academic life, I think that would really negatively affect their personal life. And I think we have to be thinking about students personally and not just academically here. I also think that banning them in lunch periods and study halls is, I feel like, me personally, I think it's going a tiny bit far, especially because I personally, being in school every day, I see students interacting a lot through their phones. There's video games that they all play together, and I think that if you take those away, they might actually cause more disruptive behavior. Like, especially if they can't get their energy out through a video game and they have to sit in a study hall, like, seniors are still acting like that, and I think that taking that away from them might not really help with the behavioral issues. I think that, like, in classes, definitely we can take them away, but I don't know if I support it not being available during study halls, lunches, and not being available to the students that it might really affect them not having, like, kids like me, I think.
Thank you for speaking up. I know it's not always easy, but we appreciate it.
Thank you. Now we have the presentation of a new textbook, and this is for the business. So Daphne has it, Exploring Design, Technology, and Engineering. All right, then.
Sorry, I just have a quick question. I was trying to figure out what class it is for.
It was the tech department, so it was reviewed by John Kerner, Brady Rogers.
I personally like textbooks. Sorry, I'm a geek. All right, I'm going to move us on to our action items then. Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting of January 13th, 2025?
Dave and Jim.
Any discussion? All in favor? I'd like a motion to approve the finance reports for the month ending January 31st, 2025, and we did add in the internal claims report.
Eric, Angela,
Any discussion? All in favor? If I could have a motion to accept the Committee on Special Education recommendations.
Jim and Eric,
Any discussion? All in favor? If I could have a motion to approve the personnel agenda.
Jim, Eric,
Any discussion? All in favor? I need a motion to approve the library resolutions to be placed on the ballot at the annual vote and election on May 20th, 2025.
Angela, Eric,
Any discussion? All in favor? I need a motion to approve the estimated tuition rates for 2024-2025.
Kelly and Eric,
Any discussion? All in favor? I need a motion to approve the updated policies 6260, 3131, and new policy 2155.
Dave, Kelly,
Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you, everyone. All right, topics for discussion at a future meeting. Does anyone have anything?
I will have an update on the town alarm law by the next meeting, so if you can just add that to the agenda. There was a public hearing, nobody showed up, I was the only one that had anything to say, so they tabled it until the next meeting. And that is the 17th.
Of February? Okay. Any other topics?
It's not really for a future meeting, but I'd like to get a coffee chat with the community on the books for March. So if anybody hasn't done it yet and would like to be involved, maybe we can work around your dates. Otherwise, start cycling back through and see who we can get.
Okay. So date TBD, just March at this point? Okay. All right, and just a couple of reminders for us. Let's see, Monday, the 24th at 6 p.m., we've got the budget discussion number 2, which will be the program components. Then on Wednesday, the 26th at 6 p.m., we have our mid-year analysis and school improvement plan. On March 3rd, we have the capital component, administration and revenue. And then our next board meeting is on Monday, March 10th. Which is a business meeting, so please mark your calendars accordingly. All right, then I'll move us on to the closing open forum, and please note the same guidelines apply as stated during the first open forum. Is there anyone that would like to speak? Do we have any emails?
We do not.
Okay, then if I could have a motion to adjourn the meeting. There we go, any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everyone.